Okay, let's be real. Chad is not topping bucket lists, nor is it plastered across Instagram. And chances are you've never heard much about it. But hidden in the heart of Africa is a country that might just surprise you. Chad is raw, complex, and full of stories, some ancient and some unfolding right now. So in the next few minutes, we'll travel through its past, explore its landscapes, dive deep into its economy, and get a glimpse into the lives of the people who call it home. Thousands of years ago, the Sahara wasn't a dry, empty place. It was green, full of rivers, animals, and people. In fact, in the northern part of Chad, you can still find ancient rock art showing giraffes, elephants, and even people swimming. These paintings tell us that this land was once full of life and that humans have been living here for a very long time, some of which was as old as 7,000 years. By 500 BCE, complex societies had started to form around Lake Chad. Because of this, it became a centre for farming, fishing, and trade. Then came the rise of powerful African kingdoms. Starting around the 9th century, the Kanem Empire became one of the biggest and strongest in the region. It was ruled by the Saifawa dynasty, which lasted for nearly 1,000 years. The Kanem Empire was known for its cavalry, its Islamic scholars, and its control over major trade routes that stretched all the way across the Sahara. They traded things like ivory, salt, textiles, and unfortunately also slaves. Over time, the Kanem Empire started to decline due to internal fighting and invasions, but it didn't disappear altogether. It simply just moved west and became the Bornu Empire, which kept the Saifawa dynasty going and remained a major power in the region. At the same time, new kingdoms were rising in what's now southern and eastern Chad. For instance, the Bagirmi kingdom emerged in the 15th century and became Islamic in the 1600s. Then there was the Wadai Empire, which began in the 1630s and quickly became a regional powerhouse. These southern kingdoms had their own armies, their own cultures, and sometimes fought with each other for control of land and trade routes. Wadai especially became known for resisting outsiders, even managing to hold off Turkish, Egyptian, and European advances for a while. But things started to change fast in the late 1800s, when European powers scrambled to colonize Africa. That's when France arrived. After years of military campaigns and treaties, they defeated the last local resistance in 1900, which was led by a warlord named Rabih az-Zubayr. By 1920, France had full control over Chad and made it part of French Equatorial Africa. But honestly, France didn't invest much here. Chad was used mostly for cheap labour and cash crops like cotton. And if you're wondering about schools, roads and hospitals, well, there's almost none. Still, during World War II, Chad did something bold. It became the first French colony to support Free France and Charles de Gaulle in the fight against Nazi Germany. That earned it a little recognition, but not much changed for regular people. Then, when 1960 came around, Chad became a free country. But things didn't go smoothly. The new government was led by southern Christian elites, which didn't sit well with the mostly Muslim populations in the north. Tensions grew quickly, and by the mid-1960s, armed rebel groups started popping up in the north. By the 1970s, Chad was in full-blown civil war, and as you can imagine, fighting between different factions turned the capital, N'Djamena, into a war zone. At one point in 1979, the central government collapsed entirely, and different warlords took control of different regions. France, Libya, and other countries kept interfering, which really went both ways. Sometimes they were helping, other times they were making things worse. But in the 1980s, a new leader rose up, Hissène Habré. Backed by Western powers at the time, he took over in 1982 and ruled with an iron fist. His government tortured and killed thousands of political opponents. And after he was overthrown in 1990, he fled the country and was later found guilty of crimes against humanity. He was replaced by Idriss Déby, a former rebel who promised peace, but ended up staying in power for over 30 years. Under Déby, Chad remained politically unstable, but played an important role in regional security. By this I mean the country became a key military ally for France and the West in fighting terrorism in the Sahel. Eventually, Déby was killed in 2021 while visiting troops on the front lines of a rebel attack. But his son, Mahamat Déby, quickly took over and now leads a transitional military government. He promised to move the country toward democracy, but so far it's still unclear when, or even if, that'll actually happen. Okay, so now you know a little bit about Chad's history, but do you know what its geography is made of? To start, let me just say that Chad is huge. I'm talking almost 1.3 million square kilometers. That's about 500,000 square miles, or roughly the size of Texas, California, and Illinois combined. It's one of the biggest countries in Africa, and the largest landlocked one on the continent. That means no coastline, no beaches. Just neighbours on all sides. Libya to the north, Sudan to the east, the Central African Republic to the south, and Cameroon, Nigeria, and Niger to the west. But what makes Chad especially interesting is how different it looks from top to bottom. In the north, you've got the Sahara Desert, a dry, sun-blasted stretch of land that barely gets any rain. This part of Chad is almost empty. It's mostly home to just a few scattered nomadic groups who raise camels and goats. And in terms of the weather, it's basically dry enough to turn a raisin into dust. But even in this harsh climate, life finds a way. You'll find palm-dotted oases and wild creatures like desert crocodiles and red-necked ostriches living where you'd least expect them. Then comes the Sahel, a narrow middle band that stretches across the centre of the country. It's still pretty dry, but it gets just enough rain to support low grasslands and thorny shrubs. Also, people here raise livestock and grow crops, but it's risky because the rainy season only lasts a few months and droughts are common. So when the rains don't come, crops fail, animals suffer, and desertification creeps in, slowly turning the land to dust. Move further south, and the landscape changes again. You hit the Sudanian zone. Here the grass is taller, the trees are thicker, and farms are more productive. People grow grains, cotton, cassava, and fruits, and there's enough water to support both farming and livestock. For this reason, this is where most of Chad's people live. In the country's far southwest corner is a tiny strip of land called the Guinea Zone. It's the wettest part of Chad where lush forests, deep green fields, and tropical crops make this zone feel like a completely different country. Topographically, Chad is mostly flat. The land gently slopes down toward Lake Chad, once one of Africa's great inland seas. It used to be so big that scientists gave it a name, Mega Chad. Because believe it or not, around 7,000 years ago, it was the size of the Caspian Sea, covering an area of about 400,000 square kilometres, or roughly 150,000 square miles. But today, not so much, and here's why. Due to less rain and more water use, Lake Chad has shrunk to a fraction of its former size. Currently, it measures around 1,350 square kilometres, or just 520 square miles, compared to 25,000 square kilometres, or 9,650 square miles back in 1963. Despite this, it still plays a vital role in supporting daily activities like farming, fishing, and wildlife. Plus, little known fact, but Lake Chad is also shared by 4 countries: Chad, Nigeria, Niger, and Cameroon. As you move north and east from the lake, the land slowly rises into plateaus and mountain ranges. In central Chad, the Guira Highlands reach up to 1,500 metres, or about 4,900 feet. And in the far northeast, the rocky Enedi Plateau looks like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, complete with natural arches, caves, and rock towers carved by wind and time. But the star of the show is up in the Tibesti Mountains, a remote volcanic range in the far north. This is where you'll find Emi Koussi, an extinct volcano and Chad's highest point at 3,415 metres, or 11,200 feet. That's taller than any mountain in the Alps. And here's another cool fact. Chad is home to the lakes of Unianga, a chain of 18 otherworldly lakes tucked deep in the desert. Some are freshwater, some salty. And they're all that's left of the Green Sahara, which is a time when this now barren desert was full of grasslands, lakes, elephants, and hippos. That era, known as the African Humid Period, ended about 5,000 years ago. But in places like Unianga, you can still catch a glimpse of what once was. So now you might be wondering, what's the economy like in Chad? Well, let me tell you. Since independence from France in 1960, Chad's political landscape has been shaped by civil wars, coups, and ethnic divisions. And after the death of longtime President Idriss Déby in 2021, his son, Mahamat Déby, took control through a military council. Though elections were eventually held in 2024, major opposition parties boycotted them, and Déby won with 61% of the vote. Today, democracy exists in form, but power remains concentrated in one ruling party. Economically, Chad is still one of the world's poorest countries, despite being oil-rich. Before 2003, agriculture, especially cotton and livestock, was the backbone of the economy. Now oil dominates. In fact, in 2023, Chad's economy was valued at around $11 billion US. But with its fast-growing population, wealth isn't keeping pace. By 2043, Chad's population is expected to nearly double from 18 million to nearly 35 million. Yet per-person income is projected to remain flat, recovering only slightly from a decade-long decline. Poverty is widespread, which means about 35% of Chadians live below the global extreme poverty line of $2.15 per day, and that number rose sharply after recent floods wiped out crops and livestock, pushing 500,000 more into poverty. On top of this, the country also faces huge social challenges. Chad ranks 144th out of 146 in gender equality. 1 in 5 children won't make it to age 5. Maternal deaths are among the highest in the world, and on average, kids spend just 5 years in school. But fortunately, all that's about to change, because Chad's Vision 2030 plan focuses on unity, governance, economic growth, and quality of life. Future projections show that with reforms in sectors like agriculture, education, and infrastructure, Chad could cut poverty in half, nearly double per-person income, and raise life expectancy by 4 years. Which brings us to our next topic, culture. When it comes to culture, Chad is a patchwork of over 200 ethnic groups, each with its own traditions, languages, and ways of life. And honestly, they've never really been fused into one neat national identity. Most groups still see themselves as separate, autonomous communities rather than part of one big cultural whole. Geography plays a big role in this, as we've seen earlier in the video. Down south, you've got the Sahara people. They make up half the country's population and tend to live in settled communities. They're mostly Christian, and their lives revolve around farming and community. Now, if you head north, things change completely. Up there, it's mostly nomadic tribes. Many of them are Muslim who travel with their livestock across desert terrain. Then, in the middle of the country, it's a mix. Some people settle, some move with the seasons. It's kind of like a cultural transition zone. Even religion blends in unique ways. Most Chadians identify as Muslim, but Islam here isn't exactly textbook. It's deeply intertwined with older, indigenous spiritual traditions. And the same goes for Christianity. Around a third of Christian Chadians incorporate animist rituals into their practice, and about 10% of the population still stick exclusively to traditional African religions, especially in the rural south. When it comes to language, things get even more colourful, because although French and Arabic are the official languages, there are over 100 local languages spoken across the country. In rural areas, French isn't really used, and instead a local version of Arabic called Chadian Arabic is the go-to for trade and daily life. You can see all this cultural variety on a plate too. There's no single national dish in Chad, and what people eat depends a lot on where they live. Down south, the diet is heavy on farm goods like rice, red beans, potatoes and fruits. You'll also find spices, millet, and a good amount of domesticated meats. In contrast, northern diets are shaped by the nomadic lifestyle, so more milk, meat and fish, with grain dishes being more occasional than every day. Still, if there's one dish that comes close to being universal, it's boule. Think of it as a thick porridge that's rolled into a ball and dipped into sauce. In the south, it's made from millet. In the north, maize is more common. The sauces it's served with can include meat, dried fish, tomatoes, okra and spices. Interestingly enough, their food customs reflect the community mindset. The main meal is usually served at midday, and it's a big deal, especially when guests are around. You wait for the host to signal when it's time to eat, often with a prayer. Oh, and saying no to food. That's considered really rude. Meals are shared from a communal bowl, everyone's seated on mats, and you eat with your right hand. No forks necessary. There's also a drink scene that shifts depending on where you are. In the south, people enjoy bili bili. It's a homemade beer made from millet or sorghum. But in the predominantly Muslim north, alcohol's not a big part of the culture. So, tea is the real MVP across the country. Whether it's black tea, green tea, or hibiscus tea spiced with local herbs, it's a social staple. Moving on to art and architecture, Chad really has a long memory, as you have seen in its history. You can find ancient rock paintings in the Tibesti Mountains, especially around Gonoa and Zua. There are also relics from the Sao culture near Lake Chad, like terracotta sculptures that hint at an advanced civilization that predates modern borders. In the capital, N'Djamena, things feel a bit more modern. You'll find busy cafes, taverns, and even discos. And there's this cool tradition called Pari Match. And essentially, it's when someone rents out a public space or bar throws a party, and whatever they make from drink sales goes toward paying for things like school fees or house repairs. Kind of like a party with a purpose, which is pretty awesome if you ask me. N'Djamena is also the place to go if you want to check out the National Museum or shop local markets for crafts like camel hair jackets, pottery, woven textiles, you name it. And yes, Chad has its own music scene. It's small but vibrant. Musicians often blend traditional instruments with Western pop, creating a sound that's distinctively Chadian. One of the most well-known is Clément Masdonga, a ballad singer who's gained fans across French-speaking Africa and even performed in European festivals. There's also the dance group known as Tibesti, which has made waves abroad. Of course, Chad has also embraced modern sports like soccer and basketball. But because most roads are dirt and hard to travel, especially during the rainy season, it's tough to hold regional tournaments or get teams into international competitions. Although Chad did send athletes to the Olympics for the first time back in 1964, but they've never won a medal. Yet. Now we wait and see what the future holds for Chadian sports. So, by now, you've seen the many sides of Chad, and now it's your turn. If you had 48 hours to explore just one part of this incredible country, where would you go? And what would you want to experience? Personally, I've got my eye on the Boule. What about you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you loved this video, you'll definitely enjoy this next one.